When my son got sick, I drove 90 minutes to pick him up from my in-laws. My mother-in-law handed him over with a smile. "We thought about calling you, but then realized you're not the real parent here." My wife didn't defend me. I kissed my son's forehead and said, "You'll always know who showed up." That same night, their front lawn was lit with something they thought I'd forgotten. I've been a part of my son's life since he was 6 months old. His biological dad disappeared before he could crawl. I met my wife when she was still recovering from that, trying to be a single mom and pretend she was okay. I was just some guy in her night class who asked if she wanted coffee one night after lecture. That was 8 years ago. I never planned on being a dad, let alone to someone else's kid. But I loved him immediately. Not in a fairy tale kind of way. It was messy and exhausting and terrifying. But I loved him anyway. He clung to me before he even called me dad. I was the one who sat with him through fevers, who learned the different cries, who knew which stuffed animal had to be next to him before he'd fall asleep. His mother, my wife, let me take over most things. I didn't mind. I thought that was what partnership was. I worked full-time. I cooked. I stayed up with him during his nightmares. I helped with the adoption paperwork and signed the forms with a shaking hand when he was 4. I became his legal parent. But to her parents, I was always just the guy she married. They never liked me. Not outright hateful, just cold, distant. My job wasn't impressive to them. My background didn't match theirs. I didn't grow up in a family that vacationed or sent holiday cards. I just worked, paid rent on time, and did what I said I would. That wasn't enough. They'd refer to me as his stepdad in front of him, even after the adoption. My wife would correct them at first, but over the years, she stopped. I think she got tired of the tension. She always wanted their approval, even when they didn't deserve it. 2 months ago, I had to go on a short work trip, nothing fancy, just a warehouse inspection about 3 hours away. My wife and I agreed her parents would watch our son for 2 days. It was supposed to be simple. But halfway through the second day, I got a call from the school nurse. He had a fever. He was shaking and crying, asking for me. The thing I made in my old life was a metal branding stencil. Back then, I worked at a small fabrication shop, mostly custom signs, farm equipment, restoration stuff. I'd made a stencil with my last name on it, pressed into steel. It was supposed to go on a smoker I built for my uncle before he died. I never used it, just tossed it in a box, kept it out of habit. It had sat in the back of my garage since we moved into this house. That night, after what they said to me, after the silence from my wife, I pulled it out and stared at it like it was something holy, something real, something that still meant I existed, that I was his dad, that I belonged somewhere. I didn't do anything reckless. I'm not that kind of man. But I still remembered the layout of their lawn, the flower bed by the porch, how the grass sloped near the driveway. And I remembered what kind of fertilizer burns fast if you write with it. By morning, their lawn had one word burned into it, deep and black: Father. I didn't leave a note. I didn't text. I didn't answer when my wife's mom called 6 times in a row, or when my wife finally sent a message saying, "You went too far." Too far. After 8 years? After court documents and kindergarten drop-offs and stomach flu at 3 a.m. and 1,000 small things no one ever thanked me for? They had no idea how far I could go. That week, I stayed quiet. I didn't bring it up. I still made breakfast, still packed lunches, still folded our son's shirts. But something shifted. My wife avoided eye contact. She acted like nothing happened, like if we didn't talk about it, it would disappear. But it didn't. Not for me. Not for our son, either. He started asking more questions, like why I picked him up instead of mom. Why grandma was mad. Why she said what she said. He heard more than they thought. One night, I heard him whisper, "You're still my real dad," before falling asleep. I went into the bathroom and sat on the floor, just breathing, trying not to lose it. I didn't deserve that much love from him. But I had it. Somehow. Still. 3 weeks passed. Then came another hit I didn't see coming. One day, I got a call from his school. The principal. They said I was removed from the authorized guardian list. I thought it was a mistake. I drove over there in person. Asked to see the paperwork. My name was scratched off. My wife had replaced it with her mother's name. When I got home, I asked her about it. Calmly. She looked tired, like she hadn't slept well. She wouldn't meet my eyes again. Said something about how it's just for emergencies, and mom's closer to the school during the day, and you tend to get too emotional. Too emotional? I stood outside that house for 10 minutes after she said that. I didn't even know what to say. That night, I moved into the guest room, told her I needed space to think. She didn't fight it. I started keeping a journal, documenting everything. Dates, times, what was said. I printed the school change form. I saved texts. I even made copies of his birth certificate and my adoption papers and kept them in a binder under my bed. Something in me knew I had to be ready. And then came the next twist. My son had a school event, a play. I showed up with my camera like always. I had even ironed his shirt the night before. When I got there, he wasn't in the front with the other kids. I found him backstage crying. He said his grandma told him, "Maybe your real dad will show up next time." I didn't tell him I was already there. I didn't tell him I'd driven straight from work and skipped dinner to see him. I just knelt down and said, "I'm here now," and took him home early. That night, I sat in my car outside our house for an hour after he fell asleep. My hands were shaking. I looked at our front door and realized it didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like something I was slowly being erased from. But they forgot one thing. I have never let go of something I love. I don't scream. I don't punch walls. I don't threaten. I build. I wait. I document. And I was getting ready to do all three. A week after the school play, my wife came home late. She smelled like wine and someone else's cologne. I didn't ask. I didn't want to hear lies dressed up as excuses. I just watched her walk past me like I was furniture and go straight to the shower. 10 minutes later, she was asleep. I sat in the dark kitchen and stared at the fridge, wondering how we got here. How you can build a life with someone who silently hopes you vanish from it. Then came the first real crack in their control. Our son got the flu again. Not a bad one this time. Just enough to keep him out of school. He asked for me to stay home with him. My wife said her mom was free to come by and help. He said, "I don't want grandma here." That sentence changed everything. It was the first time he had ever said it out loud. He looked scared after he said it, like he was afraid he'd get in trouble. I hugged him and said it was okay to feel that way. He asked me, "Is it bad if I only feel safe with you?" I didn't know how to answer that. So I told him, "It's not bad. It's honest." She still sent her mother over. I sent her back at the door. That night, my wife exploded. Said I was turning him against her family. That I was making things harder than they had to be. I finally said it straight. "He's afraid of them. Why don't you care?" She had no answer. She just stared at me like I'd grown horns. After that fight, I started hearing from her less. Less texts. Less small talk. Less warmth. She started sleeping in later, coming home later. I started doing everything on my own. Mornings, homework, dinners. I think deep down, she wanted me to quit. To get tired. To just leave so she wouldn't have to be the bad one. But I didn't. I stayed. I documented. I kept calm. I talked to a lawyer quietly. Asked questions. Learned things. That's when the twist came. I found out she was seeing her ex again. Her son's biological father. It was quiet. Careful. They met during the day, when I was at work and our son was at school. I wouldn't have known if I hadn't noticed a strange name on our cell phone bill. I ran a search. It was him. Same number from a restraining order she filed years ago. The one she never talked about. Only told me he was gone for good. They weren't just talking. They were meeting. And suddenly, it all made sense. Why her parents were acting like I didn't matter. Why she removed me from the school contact list. Why they were pushing me further out. They were trying to rewrite history. Rewrite his life. Bring the biological dad back in. Quietly. Like I never existed. But it wasn't just betrayal. It was dangerous. That man had hurt her in the past. That's why she ran. That's why I was in their lives to begin with. And now she was letting him back in. Risking our son's safety. Because she didn't want to be alone. Because her parents liked the real bloodline better. I took it to my lawyer. Gave him copies. Documents. Call logs. All of it. Then I did something harder than anything I'd done so far. I sat my son down. Carefully. Slowly. I didn't say much. I just told him that no matter what happened, he'd always have a home with me. That I wasn't going anywhere. That I would fight for him. He nodded and didn't say anything. But that night, he left a drawing on my pillow. It was just 2 stick figures. One big, one small. Underneath, in shaky handwriting, it said, "Real Dad." I kept it. Still have it in my wallet. The next morning, my wife told me casually, like it was normal, that we need to have a talk soon, as a family. I asked her who she meant by we. She said me, you, and his father. And just like that, I realized the storm wasn't coming. It was already here. When she said, "We need to talk," and included her ex in that sentence, I knew she had already decided. I just didn't know what she had decided yet. The next few days were a blur. I stayed quiet, went through the motions. Packed lunches, checked homework, showed up to work like I was fine. But I was documenting everything. Every text, every lie, every drop-off where she was running late, but I knew where she really was. Then came the night she sat me down. It was cold out. February. She poured herself a glass of wine like this was any other night, like we were just two people chatting after dinner. She said her ex wanted to be involved again, that he had changed. That our son has the right to know where he came from. I stared at her while she said it. The same woman who used to cry herself to sleep holding our son when he was a baby, afraid that man would come back. Now she was inviting him into our lives, like I'd just been a placeholder. I asked her one thing. Just one. Did you tell him I adopted our son? She looked down, took a sip, said nothing. That's when I knew. She was trying to undo it. Quietly. Illegally, maybe. She had already started. The next morning, I filed for emergency custody. My lawyer had already built the case. Everything was ready. I had texts, photos, school records, her edits to the guardian list, her known contact with a man she once had legally removed from her life. I had witnesses, his teacher, our neighbor, even the doctor who had seen our son crying during one of her parents' visits. I filed for full custody, citing emotional endangerment, willful neglect of legal adoption agreements, and coordinated alienation. The court granted me temporary full custody until the hearing. She was served 2 days later. She lost it, screaming, crying, accusing me of betrayal, saying I was destroying our family. I didn't yell. I didn't say much. Just handed her a copy of the adoption paperwork with her signature at the bottom and said, "You gave him to me. You don't get to take that back because you're lonely now." The part that broke me most was seeing my son's face when she left that day. She didn't say goodbye. Just slammed the door. He looked at me and said, "Was it my fault?" I held him until he fell asleep. Her parents showed up that weekend. Tried to talk to me. Tried to play the "we're just doing what's best for him" card. I didn't let them in. Told them to get off my property. Later that night, they found something on their front lawn again. This time it wasn't burned into the grass. This time it was a laminated copy of the court documents, folded neatly, with a post-it note that said, "You're not his family anymore." Legally, the hearing came fast. She showed up with her ex. That same man she once called a danger to her and her baby. Now she clung to him like he was a lifeline. They tried to paint me as controlling. Said I was manipulating the situation. Said I isolated her from her family. But I had everything. Videos, messages, testimony from the school counselor, copies of the revoked guardian form, even a letter from our son's therapist, who had started seeing him weekly once I noticed the anxiety. The judge looked tired, like he'd seen 100 of these. But he saw through them. He ruled in my favor. Full legal custody. Supervised visitation for her. None for the ex. He had no rights. She had no path to reverse the adoption without proving fraud, and there was none. I was his father in every way the court recognized. She cried in the hallway afterward. Her mother glared at me. Her father didn't even show up. I walked outside with my son's small hand in mine. He asked, "Do I ever have to see them again?" I told him, "Not if you don't want to." That was a year ago. She sees him twice a month now. Supervised. At a visitation center. She brings books sometimes. Tries to act like nothing happened. He doesn't say much to her. I don't encourage hate, but I let him feel what he feels. Her ex disappeared again. Surprised no one. Her parents cut contact after I sent them a final letter telling them to never approach my son again. I attached a copy of the restraining order I filed after they showed up outside his school one afternoon. That was the last straw. They disappeared after that. I don't celebrate the way some people might. I don't walk around saying I won. I just breathe easier now. My son laughs more, sleeps better, draws more pictures. He calls me dad like he always has. But now he says it without fear that someone might correct him. As for me, I changed. I'm not proud of how quiet I was for so long. I let things slide. I tried to be nice when I should have drawn lines. I should have fought sooner. That's on me. But I fought when it counted. I stayed when it mattered. I showed up every time. That's the difference. In the end, the revenge wasn't fire or noise. It was custody. It was the truth. It was the moment that little boy looked at me and said, "I knew you wouldn't let me go." He was right. I never will. The week before the hearing, something happened that I hadn't prepared for. I got a call from Child Protective Services. A woman named Carla. Soft voice, firm tone. She said a report had been filed against me, anonymous, but claimed I was emotionally manipulating my son, isolating him from his mother, and creating a hostile environment. I almost laughed, but it wasn't funny. She asked if she could do a home visit. I said yes. I had nothing to hide. When she showed up, my son was doing a puzzle on the living room floor. The house was clean, food in the fridge, a printout of his doctor visits on the table, his therapist's note framed on the counter. He drew it himself. It said, "My house is safe." Carla looked around. "Talk to me." Talk to my son privately in his room. She stayed for an hour. Then she left her card on the table and said, "I don't see anything concerning here." But the damage had already been done. Someone tried to get me disqualified as a parent. I knew who it was. I couldn't prove it, but I knew. Her parents, or maybe her ex, or maybe her, trying to create leverage in court. It scared me, more than I thought it would. Not because I had anything to hide, but because it showed how far they were willing to go. That night, I sat down and wrote a full statement for my lawyer, just in case. I made copies of every school paper, every prescription, every text that showed she'd been absent or hostile. I didn't sleep much that week. I was tired all the time, but I never stopped moving, never stopped showing up. Then, a few days later, her ex showed up, outside my son's school. I didn't see it in person, thank God. But the school called me in. They said a man was parked across the street. He didn't try to come inside. He just sat in his truck and watched. A teacher recognized him from the time he picked my wife up from school once. A decade ago. That was enough to get the school on alert. They called the police, filed a report. They also pulled my wife's visitation privileges until the court hearing. When I confronted her, by text, not in person, she claimed she didn't know he'd gone there. That he just wanted to see what his son looked like. His son. That word hit me like a truck. She said it like I didn't exist. Like he still had a right to anything. Like 8 years of being there meant nothing next to 5 minutes of DNA. I didn't reply. Instead, I requested a police escort for the court hearing. Not because I was scared, but because I wanted to be seen doing this right, by the book, by the law, by the truth. I wanted the court to see the difference between a man trying to rewrite history and a man who never left. The courtroom was packed that day. Her family showed up, sitting tight-lipped on her side. Her ex didn't come. I think his lawyer told him to stay away, too risky now. But she was still sitting there, calm, polished, like this was all just a misunderstanding. Like I was overreacting. She tried to talk to me before it started. Said, "We don't have to fight like this." I just looked at her and said, "You already started the war." Then I walked in. The hearing hadn't even begun yet. The courtroom smelled like old carpet and cold coffee. I sat alone at my table with 2 folders, one with court documents and one with proof. My lawyer leaned over and said we were ready. I looked across the aisle. My wife wore a soft pink blouse, hair brushed. Her parents sat behind her, stiff and silent. No smiles, no emotion, like they were at a funeral. Maybe they were. Her ex didn't come. He had been advised not to after the school incident. But his shadow still hung in the air. Everyone knew why we were really here. The judge came in, older man, slow voice, sharp eyes. He'd seen it all. We were sworn in. I was asked to speak first. I told them everything. Slowly, carefully, no drama, just facts. That I met my wife when her son was 6 months old. That I fed him, rocked him, paid for his diapers, taught him to ride a bike. That I adopted him legally. That I have never missed a single parent-teacher meeting. That I was removed from emergency contacts without cause. That she brought a dangerous man back into our child's life. That she tried to erase me from the role I had earned. Then I read one short thing. It was my son's drawing. The stick figures. The words, "Real Dad," in crooked blue marker. I said, "This is how he sees me. And this is who I'll keep being, for the rest of his life, if the court allows." The room was silent. Her turn came. She tried to say I was possessive, that I was controlling the story. Her lawyer brought up the fact that she was the biological parent. Said that should mean something. That blood matters. Then came her biggest mistake. They tried to say I pressured her into letting me adopt him. That she was vulnerable. That I had taken advantage of the situation. The judge stopped them. He looked at her and asked one question. Did you sign the adoption papers of your own free will? She paused, then nodded. He leaned back and said, then he is the father. And you don't get to rewrite that because you changed your mind. That was the moment it all changed. It wasn't loud. There was no applause. Just stillness. A truth too big to deny. He ruled that day. Full custody to me. Supervised visits for her. Once a month at a center. Her parents were barred from contact permanently. Her ex was issued a no-contact order. And I was officially, legally, and permanently recognized as my son's sole parent. When the gavel hit the desk, I didn't smile. I just closed my eyes and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. She cried in the hallway. Her mother tried to follow me out of the building. Security stopped her. I didn't look back. My son was waiting at home with my sister. When I walked in, he ran to the door. Said, "Are we okay now?" I said, "We're okay forever." That night, we ate pancakes for dinner. He fell asleep on the couch watching the same cartoon he's loved since he was 5. Later, I opened a drawer and pulled out something I had kept hidden for years. It was the very first onesie he ever wore that said, "Best Dad Ever." My wife bought it for me on my first Father's Day. I folded it gently and put it in a new box, one I started for him. His memory box. Only the truth goes in it now. No lies. No edits. Just love that stayed. 1 year later, he's 9 now. He laughs a lot more. Sleeps through the night. Doesn't ask about them anymore. She still visits once a month. He never wants to go. I don't force it. I let him choose. He asked me last week if I could help him build a treehouse. I said, only if I get to sleep in it too. He grinned and said, deal. And that's the revenge. Not fire. Not shouting. Not ruining their lives. Just being the one who stayed. The one who never stopped showing up. The one who gave him a home when everyone else gave him reasons to doubt it. They lost him. I didn't take him. They gave him away through silence, through cruelty, through trying to control something they never earned. And now, he knows the truth. And no one can take that from either of us. Ever.